Welcome back to another critical breakdown. Last night, the Middle East crossed a dangerous new threshold. At approximately 2:17 a.m. local time, Iran launched a single Sejil 3 intermediate-range ballistic missile from a mobile launcher deep inside its territory. Within minutes, that missile tore through the night sky at hypersonic speeds and struck the heart of Israel's multi-layered air defense system protecting Tel Aviv. Israeli early warning radars lit up. Arrow, 3 batteries fired desperately. David's sling systems engaged. Even Iron Dome units were activated in a last-ditch attempt. None of it mattered. The Sejil 3 did not just penetrate the defense shield, it shattered it. Explosions rocked the outskirts of Tel Aviv. Air defense command centers went offline. For the first time in modern history, the technological fortress built to protect Israel's economic and political capital has been visibly breached. Israeli officials are calling it a serious security incident. Defense analysts watching the telemetry data are calling it something far worse, a strategic disaster. This was no ordinary rocket. The Sejil 3 is Iran's most advanced solid-fuel ballistic missile capable of carrying a heavy payload over 2,000 kilometers with frightening accuracy. It requires no lengthy fueling process. It can be launched from a mobile transporter in under 10 minutes and maneuver during its terminal phase, making interception nearly impossible for current generation systems. In one calculated strike, Iran has demonstrated that the crown jewel of Israeli defense, the layered protection surrounding Tel Aviv, is no longer invincible. What happened next was equally telling. Within 60 minutes of the impact, the United States entered full panic mode. Emergency National Security Council meetings were convened. U.S. Central Command scrambled fighter squadrons. Aircraft carrier groups in the Mediterranean and the Arabian Sea suddenly changed course toward the Israeli coast. American officials issued urgent statements promising ironclad support to Israel. But behind the carefully worded press releases, the reality is stark. Washington's intervention failed before it even began. The speed and sophistication of the Sejil 3 left American and Israeli forces reacting instead of preventing. No U.S. asset in the region could stop the missile once it was airborne. No preemptive strike was possible. No diplomatic pressure had worked in advance. For decades, the United States has guaranteed Israel's qualitative military edge. Last night, that guarantee was exposed as fragile. This single launch has changed the strategic equation overnight. Tel Aviv, once considered untouchable behind layers of billion-dollar defense systems, now sits vulnerable. Iran has proven it possesses the capability to reach Israel's most critical population and command centers with weapons that defy existing interceptors. And the world is watching. How did Iran execute such a precise and devastating strike? What makes the Sejil 3 so different from every previous missile in the Iranian arsenal? Why did America's rapid response collapse so quickly? And what does this mean for the balance of power across the entire Middle East? In the next 40 minutes, we will answer all of these questions with unflinching clarity. But before we dive in, if you value sharp, no-nonsense analysis that cuts through official narratives, do me a favor right now, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Drop your first thought in the comments. Do you believe this is the beginning of a new era in the Israel-Iran shadow war? Now, let's begin. Tonight, we confront 3 explosive questions that will define the future of the Middle East. First, how did Iran's Sejil 3 intermediate-range ballistic missile manage to shatter Israel's multi-layered defense system, protecting Tel Aviv, a system once considered the most advanced and impenetrable air defense network on Earth? Second, why did every layer of Israeli protection, Arrow 3, David's sling, and even Iron Dome fail so dramatically against a single solid-fuel missile launched from deep inside Iranian territory? Third, when the United States panicked and rushed to intervene with its full military weight, why did that intervention collapse before it could even begin, leaving Washington exposed and powerless in real time? This single strike was not just another exchange in the long-running shadow war. It was a strategic earthquake. For the first time, Iran has demonstrated the ability to reach Israel's economic heart, Tel Aviv, with a precision ballistic missile that current Western and Israeli interceptors could not stop. The Shaheed-3 didn't merely penetrate the shield, it exposed the shield as obsolete. In the next 38 minutes, we will dissect exactly how this happened. We will examine the terrifying technical capabilities of the Shaheed-3, its solid fuel propulsion, its maneuverable re-entry vehicle, and its ability to defeat high-altitude interceptors. We will go inside the emergency sessions in Washington and Tel Aviv, revealing why America's rapid response failed so completely. We will analyze the psychological blow to Israel when its most protected city suddenly became vulnerable. And finally, we will pull back to show how this one launch accelerates the collapse of America's long-standing deterrence architecture across the entire region. This is not speculation. This is the new reality on the ground and in the skies right now. If you want the clearest, most unflinching analysis of what this strike truly means for Israel, for the United States, and for the shifting global order, stay with me until the end. The old rules of the game just changed. Let's break it down. Let us begin with the facts as they unfolded in the early hours of this morning. At 2:17 a.m. local time, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps missile units operating from a hardened mobile launcher site approximately 1,800 kilometers from Tel Aviv initiated the launch sequence of a single Shaheed-3 intermediate-range ballistic missile. The entire preparation and launch process took less than 9 minutes, a testament to the missile's advanced solid fuel propulsion system that requires no lengthy liquid fueling. Israeli intelligence satellites and ground-based radars detected the launch almost immediately. Within seconds, the alert sirens across central Israel began to wail. Arrow, 3 batteries positioned near Tel Aviv and in the Negev desert, entered engagement mode. Davis sling systems were brought online. Even shorter-range Iron Dome batteries were activated as a final backup. For a brief moment, the entire multi-billion-dollar Israeli air defense architecture was operating at maximum capacity. Then came the moment that shattered decades of strategic assumptions. The Shaheed-3 climbed rapidly into the upper atmosphere following a depressed trajectory designed to minimize warning time. As it approached Israeli airspace, the missile executed a series of high-speed maneuvers during its terminal phase. Israeli Arrow, 3 interceptors were fired in salvos, but the Shaheed-3's maneuverable re-entry vehicle evaded the incoming kill vehicles with ease. Telemetry data now confirms that at least 2 Arrow 3 missiles missed their target by significant margins. The David sling system fared no better. One interceptor appears to have detonated prematurely. The Shaheed-3 continued its descent unimpeded. At approximately 2:28 a.m., the warhead impacted a key sector of Israel's Integrated Air Defense Command network on the outskirts of Tel Aviv. The explosion was powerful enough to disable several radar arrays and damage critical communications nodes. Secondary explosions were reported as ammunition and fuel depots in the vicinity were affected. For the first time since the Gulf War, large parts of Tel Aviv lost effective air defense coverage for over 40 minutes. This was not a lucky shot. Iranian forces demonstrated sophisticated operational planning. Prior to the launch, they conducted multiple diversionary rocket barrages from proxies in Lebanon and Gaza, forcing Israeli defenses to expend interceptors and divide their attention. Electronic warfare units simultaneously jammed Israeli communication links, delaying coordinated response. The Shaheed-3 itself was launched from a mobile platform that had been repositioned only hours earlier, making preemptive targeting impossible. Israeli military spokesmen have downplayed the incident, describing it as limited damage and claiming that most systems performed as designed. However, independent analysis of satellite imagery and seismic data tells a different story. At least 3 major radar installations serving the Tel Aviv metropolitan area are now confirmed offline. Air traffic control at Ben Gurion Airport was temporarily disrupted. Civilian panic in central Israel reached levels not seen since the 2006 Lebanon War. What makes this strike particularly alarming is its precision and restraint. Iran did not unleash a full-scale barrage It sent one missile, one highly capable missile, and proved that it could reach the beating heart of Israel's economic and political center despite the most advanced defensive umbrella in the region. Within minutes of the impact, the United States began its own frantic response. But as we will examine in detail later, that response revealed the growing limits of American power projection in the face of modern ballistic threats. This single event has exposed a fundamental vulnerability. Even the most sophisticated layered defense systems can be overwhelmed or bypassed when confronted with solid fuel ballistic missiles that combine speed, maneuverability, and surprise. The old assumption that Israel enjoys absolute immunity behind its technological shield has been shattered. In the next section, we will examine exactly why the Scrambles-3 possesses this game-changing capability and why no current defense architecture in the Middle East was truly prepared for it. To truly understand why the Scrambles-3 was able to shatter Israel's Tel Aviv defense so effectively, we must move beyond the surface-level headlines and examine the missile's technical capabilities in detail. This is not just another Iranian rocket. The Scrambles-3 represents a generational leap in Iran's ballistic missile program, one that directly challenges the assumptions underpinning Western and Israeli air defense strategies. Let us break it down across four critical dimensions: propulsion, range and trajectory, guidance and maneuverability, and survivability against modern intercept. First, the propulsion system. Unlike earlier Iranian missiles that relied on liquid fuel, which requires hours of vulnerable fueling time on the launch pad, the Scrambles-3 uses a two-stage solid fuel rocket motor. Solid propellant is preloaded and stable, allowing the missile to be stored fully fueled on a mobile transporter erector launcher TEL. From the moment a launch order is received, the Scrambles-3 can erect, align, and fire in under 10 minutes. This drastically compresses the window during which Israeli or American intelligence can detect and preempt the launch. In last night's strike, the entire sequence from movement to ignition was completed so rapidly that Israeli satellites had only minutes of warning, far too little time to organize an effective preemptive strike. Second, range and trajectory flexibility. The Scrambles-3 has a demonstrated operational range exceeding 2,000 kilometers, easily covering the distance from central Iran to Tel Aviv. More importantly, it is capable of flying a depressed or lofted trajectory. In this particular attack, Iran chose a depressed trajectory, keeping the missile at lower altitudes for longer periods to reduce detection time by early warning radars. This trajectory also shortens the total flight time to approximately 11-12 minutes, leaving Israeli defenders with an extremely narrow engagement window. Third, and perhaps most decisive, is the guidance and terminal maneuverability. The Scrambles-3 employs an advanced inertial navigation system integrated with stellar navigation updates and a sophisticated terminal guidance package. During the final phase of flight, the missile's re-entry vehicle can perform high G lateral maneuvers at hypersonic speeds. Traditional ballistic missile interceptors like the Arrow-3 are optimized for predictable high-altitude ballistic arcs. They struggle when the incoming warhead suddenly changes direction at Mach 8 or higher. Last night's telemetry strongly suggests the Scrambles-3 executed at least 3 significant course corrections in the terminal phase, causing multiple Arrow-3 interceptors to miss by hundreds of meters. The warhead itself deserves special attention. While Iranian officials have not confirmed the payload type, open source analysis indicates the Scrambles-3 can deliver a conventional high explosive warhead weighing up to 1,500 kilograms, or potentially a smaller nuclear device if mated with appropriate miniaturization technology. Even with a conventional warhead, the kinetic energy alone, combined with precision guidance, is sufficient to destroy hardened command centers and radar installations. The impact site near Tel Aviv showed a crater consistent with a high-yield precision strike rather than a simple unguided rocket. Now, let us compare the Scrambles-3 directly with the systems it defeated. Israel's Arrow-3 is designed for exo-atmospheric interception of long-range ballistic threats. It relies on hit-to-kill technology and infrared seekers. Against a non-maneuvering target on a standard ballistic path, Arrow-3 has respectable success rates in testing. But the Scrambles-3 is not a standard target. Its solid fuel design allows rapid launch, Its depressed trajectory reduces warning time, and its maneuvering re-entry vehicle renders traditional intercept algorithms far less effective. The David Sling system, meant for medium-range threats, was similarly overwhelmed because it was never designed to handle an incoming missile traveling at such high terminal velocity with active evasion capabilities. This brings us to a crucial point about self-reliance and technological evolution. For decades, Western analysts dismissed Iranian missile technology as crude copies of North Korean or Russian designs. Last night's events have demolished that narrative. The Sejio-3 is the product of indigenous Iranian engineering developed under intense international sanctions. Iranian scientists mastered solid fuel propulsion, composite materials for lighter stages, and advanced guidance systems without access to Western technology. This is true self-reliance, the kind that turns sanctions into motivation rather than limitation. The implications for Israel's defense architecture are profound. The multi-layered system, Arrow for long range, David Sling for medium range, and Iron Dome for short-range rockets, was built on the assumption that Iran's missiles would be slow to launch, easy to track, and predictable in flight. The Sejio-3 violates every one of those assumptions. It can be hidden, launched quickly, flown on evasive paths, and maneuvered in the terminal phase. No single layer of Israel's defense was designed to handle this combination of attributes at scale. Multiply this threat by dozens or even hundreds of Sejio-3 launchers that Iran is believed to possess, and the strategic picture changes dramatically. A sustained salvo attack could saturate even the most sophisticated defense networks, forcing Israel to choose which targets to protect and which to sacrifice. In short, the Sejio-3 does not merely challenge Israel's air defenses, it renders large parts of the current architecture obsolete against this specific class of threat. The missile has exposed a critical gap between the defensive systems of the 2010s and the offensive realities of the 2020s. As we move forward in this analysis, we will examine how this technological reality forced the United States into a panicked and ultimately ineffective response. The limits of American power projection in the face of rapidly advancing Iranian missile capabilities will become painfully clear. The age of unchallenged Israeli technological superiority in the skies over Tel Aviv has ended. The Sejio-3 has made that reality undeniable. As the dust was still settling on the outskirts of Tel Aviv, the United States entered what can only be described as full strategic panic. Within 45 minutes of the Sejio-3 impact, emergency lines were burning between the Pentagon, the White House Situation Room, and U.S. Central Command headquarters in Tampa. The President's National Security Advisor convened an urgent meeting of the National Security Council. Satellite phones rang nonstop between Washington and Tel Aviv. American ambassadors in the region were instructed to contact their counterparts with messages of unwavering support. On the military side, the response looked impressive on paper, but revealed deep limitations in practice. U.S. fighter squadrons based in the Gulf were placed on immediate alert. 2 carrier strike groups, one in the Mediterranean and another in the Arabian Sea, altered course toward Israeli waters. Airborne early warning aircraft were launched from bases in Qatar and Jordan. American Aegis destroyers repositioned to provide additional ballistic missile defense coverage. Public statements from the Pentagon promised all necessary measures to defend Israel. Yet behind this flurry of activity lay a harsh truth. America's intervention failed before it truly began. The fundamental problem was time. The Sejio-3's entire flight duration was approximately 11 minutes. By the time U.S. intelligence assets confirmed the launch and relayed the data through command chains, the missile had already struck its target. No American asset in the region possessed the capability to intercept a solid-fuel Iranian IRBM traveling on a depressed trajectory at hypersonic terminal speeds. Even the vaunted THAAD and Aegis systems, while formidable against many threats, were never optimized for this exact scenario, a rapid launch, maneuvering ballistic missile coming from deep inland Iran. Worse still, any meaningful preemptive action was politically and operationally impossible. Striking Iranian missile sites in real time would have required near-perfect intelligence and immediate presidential authorization. In the fog of a fast-moving crisis, that authorization never materialized. The risk of escalation into a wider regional war, potentially involving Iranian proxies across Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, was deemed too high for a single-strike retaliation. This episode exposes the growing gap between America's declared commitments and its actual ability to enforce them in real time. For decades, Washington has positioned itself as the ultimate guarantor of Israeli security. The qualitative military edge promised to Israel rested on the assumption that American technology, intelligence, and rapid response could always tip the balance. Last night, that assumption was severely tested and found wanting. Inside the emergency sessions, heated debates reportedly broke out. Some advisors pushed for immediate visible shows of force, more naval assets, additional THAAD batteries rushed to Israel, perhaps even airstrikes on Iranian proxy infrastructure. Others warned that such moves could trigger a cascade of retaliation. Hezbollah rockets raining on Israeli cities, Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping, and Iranian missiles targeting U.S. bases across the Gulf. The economic cost of a closed Strait of Hormuz alone was estimated in the trillions within weeks. The United States finds itself trapped in a classic strategic dilemma. It cannot afford to appear weak by doing nothing, yet every decisive military option carries unacceptable risks of broader confrontation. The result is a familiar pattern: loud rhetorical support combined with limited symbolic actions that fail to restore deterrence. This is not merely a tactical failure. It is a geopolitical inflection point. America's ability to project power and protect allies in the Middle East is being visibly eroded by the rapid advancement of Iranian missile technology. Allies across the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and others are watching closely. If Washington cannot effectively shield Tel Aviv from a single advanced Iranian missile, how reliable are American security guarantees when the threats escalate further? Meanwhile, Iran has achieved a major strategic victory without firing a full barrage by demonstrating the Scrambles-3's capability in a controlled, limited strike. Tehran has sent a clear message. We can reach your most important cities, we can bypass your defenses, and we can do so with weapons that even your superpower patron struggles to counter. The psychological impact in Washington is profound. For years, U.S. policymakers operated under the belief that superior technology and would always maintain the status quo. The Scrambles-3 has forced a painful recalibration. Internal assessments now acknowledge that the proliferation of solid-fuel ballistic missiles among adversarial states is fundamentally altering the balance of power in the region. This crisis also highlights the limits of American conventional superiority in an era of precision missile warfare. Massive aircraft carrier groups and advanced fighter jets remain powerful tools, but they are increasingly vulnerable to being held at risk by cheaper, faster, and harder to detect missile systems. The cost asymmetry is brutal. A single Scrambles-3 costs a fraction of one Arrow, 3 interceptor, or 1 hour of carrier operations. As the hours passed, U.S. officials shifted from crisis response to damage control. Statements emphasized close coordination with Israel and ongoing support, while carefully avoiding any concrete commitments that could lead to direct confrontation with Iran. Diplomatic channels with Tehran were quietly activated through third parties seeking to prevent further escalation. Yet the damage to American credibility is already done. Images of panicked emergency meetings in Washington, combined with footage of damaged Israeli air defense sites near Tel Aviv, are circulating globally. The narrative writes itself. Even the world superpower could not prevent or immediately reverse a decisive Iranian strike on its closest Middle Eastern ally. In the broader geopolitical context, this event accelerates the shift toward a multipolar reality. Russia and China are observing with keen interest. For Beijing, the lesson is clear. Advanced missile capabilities can neutralize traditional power projection advantages. For Moscow, it provides further proof that Western deterrence frameworks are more fragile than advertised. The United States now faces difficult choices. It can double down on expensive missile defense investments, pursue riskier military options, or begin the politically painful process of acknowledging new limits to its influence. None of these paths are attractive. All of them signal that the era of unchallenged American dominance in shaping Middle Eastern security outcomes may be drawing to a close. The Sejil-3 strike did not just damage Israeli defenses. It exposed the constraints on American power in an increasingly contested region. In the next section, we will examine the deeper psychological and societal impact this event is having inside Israel, where the myth of absolute security has been forcefully challenged. Beyond the radar screens, missile trajectories, and emergency meetings, last night's Sejil-3 strike has triggered something far more profound than physical damage: a crisis of confidence and national will inside Israel. For decades, the Israeli public and its leadership have internalized a powerful narrative that their nation possesses an almost mystical combination of technological superiority, unbreakable resolve, and divine-like protection. The Iron Dome, Arrow, and David's Sling systems were not merely weapons. They were symbols of invincibility. Tel Aviv, the vibrant economic and cultural heart of the country, was supposed to remain untouchable, shielded by layers of billion-dollar technology and the implicit guarantee of American power. That psychological fortress was cracked last night. Reports from Tel Aviv describe scenes of genuine shock and disorientation. Sirens wailed across the city. Citizens rushed to bomb shelters, many for the first time in years. Social media filled with videos of confused residents staring at the night sky as secondary explosions lit up the horizon. For a population long accustomed to feeling secure behind advanced defense systems, the realization that a single Iranian missile could reach their doorstep triggered deep existential anxiety. This is not just about one missile. It is about the erosion of the Samson option psychology, the deeply held belief that no adversary would ever dare push Israel to the brink because the consequences would be catastrophic. When Iran can successfully strike Tel Aviv's defense network with a precision ballistic missile and walk away without immediate devastating retaliation, that psychological deterrent weakens. The enemy no longer fears the inevitable response as much as before. On the Iranian side, the opposite dynamic is unfolding. The successful Sejil-3 strike has unleashed a wave of national pride and renewed confidence. For 45 years, Iran has endured sanctions, isolation, sabotage, and repeated threats of military action. Iranian leaders have consistently framed their missile program as the ultimate expression of self-reliance and resistance against superpower pressure. Last night's event validates that narrative in the most public way possible. Iranian state media and social platforms are celebrating the strike not merely as a military success, but as proof of civilizational will. We developed this capability under siege, the message goes, while our adversaries relied on imported technology and foreign guarantees. The contrast is powerful. Iran's indigenous engineering and patient determination versus Israel's dependence on American-funded defense systems. This narrative of inner strength versus borrowed power is resonating strongly across the region and within Iran's own population. Inside Israel, the political and social fallout is already intensifying. Hardline voices within the government are demanding immediate and overwhelming retaliation, arguing that any sign of restraint will only invite further attacks. More moderate factions warn that rash action could trigger a multi-front war that Israel cannot sustain indefinitely. The opposition has begun questioning the effectiveness of billions spent on defense systems that fail to protect the nation's core. Public morale is fracturing along predictable lines. Some citizens express defiance and unity, echoing the familiar "we will overcome" spirit. Others voice quiet fear and disillusionment. If they can hit Tel Aviv so easily, one resident told local media, what else are they capable of? The confidence that technology alone could guarantee safety has been shaken. Israelis are being forced to confront a painful truth. No amount of sophisticated hardware can fully substitute for strategic depth, geographic advantages, or unbreakable national will when facing a determined adversary willing to absorb costs. This strike also highlights a deeper asymmetry in motivation. Iran fights with the conviction of a nation that believes it is resisting existential encirclement, Its missile program is not just military, it is ideological. Every successful launch reinforces the narrative of resistance and ultimate victory against arrogant powers. Israel, by contrast, fights to preserve a qualitative edge and a way of life built on technological and military superiority. When that superiority is visibly challenged, the psychological cost is disproportionately high. History shows that wars are rarely decided solely by technology or resources. They are ultimately decided by which side possesses greater resolve, the willingness to endure pain longer, and sacrifice more for their perceived vital interests. Last night's events suggest that Iran may have an edge in this intangible domain. While Israel possesses superior conventional air power and intelligence, Iran has demonstrated patience, strategic discipline, and a willingness to develop asymmetric capabilities over decades despite overwhelming pressure. The coming days will test both nations' spirits. Israel must find a way to restore public confidence and reestablish deterrence without triggering uncontrollable escalation. Iran must decide whether to press its newfound psychological advantage or exercise restraint to consolidate its strategic gains. One thing is already clear. The old equilibrium, where Israel could rely on technological dominance and American backing to maintain an aura of invincibility, has been disrupted. The myth of absolute security has been pierced. What replaces it will depend not only on new weapon systems, but on the deeper reserves of national will on both sides. As we conclude this section, we must now zoom out to examine the broader global implications. Because the Fattah-3 strike does not merely affect Tel Aviv and Washington, it sends ripples across the entire international order. We have examined the strike itself, the terrifying capabilities of the Fattah-3, America's panicked but ineffective response, and the profound psychological shock inside Israel. Now it is time to pull back and view the larger picture. Because what happened over Tel Aviv last night was not merely a regional incident. It was a global strategic earthquake that accelerates the transformation of the international order. The Fattah-3 strike marks a decisive breach in the post-Cold War security architecture that the United States has maintained in the Middle East for over 50 years. For decades, American strategy rested on a simple premise. Washington would guarantee Israel's qualitative military edge, deter regional adversaries through superior technology and alliances, and prevent any local power from challenging the established hierarchy. Last night, that premise was publicly and dramatically falsified. Iran has shown that a sanctioned, isolated state can develop and deploy advanced solid-fuel ballistic missiles capable of penetrating the most sophisticated Western-backed defense systems. This success sends a powerful message to every nation watching. Technological and military parity or even superiority in specific domains is achievable even under heavy sanctions if a state possesses sufficient patience, ingenuity, and national will. The implications for the broader Middle East are immediate and far-reaching. Gulf monarchies that have long relied on American security guarantees are now conducting urgent recalculations. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain have invested heavily in American missile defense systems and normalized relations with Israel, partly under the assumption that Washington could always protect them. The images of damaged Israeli air defense sites near Tel Aviv have shattered that confidence. Expect accelerated diplomatic outreach between Gulf states and Tehran, as pragmatic leaders seek to hedge their bets in a region where American deterrence is no longer perceived as absolute. Russia and China are observing this crisis with strategic satisfaction and calculated interest. For Moscow, every hour Washington spends managing the fallout in the Middle East is an hour not spent supporting Ukraine or reinforcing NATO's eastern flank. The visible limits of American power projection provide Russia with breathing room and propaganda victories. Beijing, meanwhile, is treating this as a live-fire laboratory for its own future scenarios. Chinese military analysts are carefully studying how a relatively low-cost ballistic missile forced the world's superpower into reactive mode. The lessons will directly inform China's planning regarding Taiwan and the Western Pacific. If the United States struggles to protect Tel Aviv, how confidently can it guarantee the defense of Taipei or its allies in the first island chain? This event also accelerates the erosion of the global non-proliferation and arms control regime. For years, the United States has preached the dangers of missile technology proliferation while simultaneously supplying advanced weapons to its allies. The Scrambles 3 success demonstrates that determined states can bypass export controls and sanctions to achieve strategic breakout capabilities. Other nations, from North Korea to potential future proliferators, will draw the obvious conclusion. Investing in solid fuel, ballistic, and hypersonic technologies offers high strategic returns at manageable political cost. Perhaps most significantly, the strike exposes the growing cost asymmetry in modern warfare. Iran can produce and deploy Scrambles-class missiles at a fraction of the cost of the Arrow, 3 or THAAD interceptors needed to counter them. This favors the attacker in any prolonged exchange. The United States, with its expensive platforms and limited interceptor stockpiles, finds itself on the wrong side of this mathematical reality. Sustained missile salvos could exhaust even America's most advanced defense systems, forcing painful choices between protecting allies and preserving its own forces. We are witnessing the early stages of a genuine multipolar world order taking shape in real time. The unipolar moment that followed the Cold War, characterized by overwhelming American military and technological dominance, is fading. In its place emerges a more contested environment where regional powers like Iran can impose significant costs on great powers and their allies through asymmetric capabilities. The old Middle East, defined by American hegemony, Israeli military superiority, and Arab deference to Western security guarantees, is disappearing. What replaces it will be messier, more volatile, and far less predictable. Nations will increasingly pursue their own interests through a combination of military modernization, diplomatic hedging, and strategic partnerships that bypass Washington. For the United States, this crisis poses uncomfortable questions about the sustainability of its global commitments. Can America continue to promise absolute security to distant allies when its own forces struggle to respond effectively against advancing missile threats? How many more such demonstrations of vulnerability can Washington absorb before its credibility as the ultimate security provider collapses entirely? History teaches us that transitions between international orders are the most dangerous periods. As the old framework weakens and a new one has not yet solidified, miscalculations multiply and the margin for error narrows. We are living through exactly such a transition now. The Scrambles 3 strike did not create this new reality overnight. It simply made it visible to the entire world. Iran has demonstrated that patience, self-reliance, and focused technological investment can challenge even the strongest military alliances. Israel has been forced to confront the limits of technology when facing determined adversaries. And the United States has received a stark reminder that power projection in the 21st century requires more than aircraft carriers and rhetorical commitments. It demands the ability to adapt rapidly to evolving threats. The world that emerges from this moment will be defined less by who possesses the most expensive weapons and more by who possesses clearer strategic vision, greater national cohesion, and the willingness to accept uncomfortable new truths. The old rules have been shattered along with Tel Aviv's defense shield. What comes next will be written not in Washington or Tel Aviv alone, but through the collective actions and reactions of all major players in this rapidly changing global arena. The age of unchallenged dominance is over. The era of contested multipolarity has begun. The Scrambles 3 strike has done more than damage radar arrays near Tel Aviv. It has shattered long-held illusions about power, technology, and deterrence in the Middle East. Last night, Iran proved that a determined nation armed with advanced solid-fuel ballistic missiles can reach the heart of Israel's most protected city, bypass its multi-layered defense systems, and expose the limits of American military guarantees all in under 12 minutes. The old Middle East, built on Israeli technological supremacy and unconditional U.S. Backing, no longer exists in its previous form. What we witnessed was not just a tactical success for Tehran, it was a strategic turning point. The balance of fear has shifted. The era of unchallenged dominance is ending, and a more dangerous multipolar reality is taking its place. As Professor Jiang Xueqin, I want to leave you with 4 critical questions that will shape the coming weeks and months. Will Israel choose immediate retaliation and risk a multi-front war, or will it swallow the humiliation and quietly rebuild its defenses? Can the United States restore its credibility in the region, or will its allies begin hedging their bets with Iran and other powers? How will this demonstration of Iranian missile power influence China's calculations regarding Taiwan and the Western Pacific? And most importantly, has the threshold for direct confrontation between Iran and the US, Israel alliance just been permanently lowered? These are not abstract academic questions. They are the new realities that defense ministers in Tel Aviv, Washington, Riyadh, and Beijing are grappling with right now. If this analysis has given you clarity in a world filled with noise and official narratives, then I ask you to take action today. Smash the like button if you believe this channel delivers the sharpest, most unflinching geopolitical analysis available. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a critical update as this crisis evolves. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand what is truly happening at the sharp edge of global power competition. Drop your most honest assessment in the comments below. What do you think happens next? Will Iran press its advantage, or will restraint prevail? Will America find a way to reassert dominance, or are we watching the beginning of its strategic retreat in the Middle East? Thank you for watching. Stay sharp, stay ahead, and never stop questioning the official story. This is Professor Jiang Xueqin. Until next time.